And hi, everybody. Obviously, it's still 1:50 and counting. So hello, I have no idea what happened to you last time when you were broken into by some punks, but whatever. So today, topic, the connections, the dots that you can connect between the gut and the brain. And so this has been a topic for me for many, many years. I mean, almost 2 decades at this point. When I early on, about 20 years, 15, 18 years ago, started talking about something we call the microbiome, and that your gut is so important for your brain and other things, a lot of people were laughing at me at the time. There was not a lot of research, but today it's just well established. What I'm going to tell you today, the connections between gut and brain, absolutely well established. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to give you a PowerPoint. So I'm going to share with you a lecture here. Make this big. Here we go. Oops. And at this point, we're going to start, and I'm just going to make my window a little small so I don't see you and it's all out of the picture. Okay. So connecting the dots, we want to talk about the gut that you see here with all the little thingies that are in this gut, the microbes, and how that connects to a variety of dots to the brain. And so those who don't know me yet, I'm a physician, MD, MBA, have a few more titles. I'm mostly concerned these days with integrative anti-aging regenerative medicine, also nutritional medicine, sports medicine. I'm looking at all these different things. I retired a few years ago, well, maybe 8 years ago now, to just do that. I retired from the hospital world where we do prescription every day and just flood patients with medication. I retired from that and went into this new world. Well, it wasn't really that new for me, where we talk about alternative care and alternative medicine and these kind of things. So having said that, we clearly need to talk about your gut, because in many languages around the world, people talk almost these same sentences. It's kind of funny because you don't typically see that with a lot of stuff that goes around the world in multiple languages, like trust your gut, follow your gut feeling, go with your gut feeling. You all heard of that, right? Always listen to your gut. Yes, no, maybe. And there's even a philosopher who said, there is a voice that doesn't use word, and you need to listen because it is extremely important. Now, we also know, sometimes you have this sinking feeling in your gut, right? So it's pulling you down underwater. All of that has really a meaning. These words have a meaning. And so when we look at the gut, we know for thousands of years in all Chinese medicine already, they were talking about the gut being at that time, maybe even the first brain, because they really didn't understand yet how the body works. But clearly over the centuries and millennia, it has always been said that the gut is the second brain. And the gut is, of course, our gastrointestinal system with the stomach and then all the little bowels and then the big bowels at the end. But really, when you talk about it, what's your brain? Well, we have obviously the brain, number one in the head. That's what you always thought was your brain. But now I just told you we have a number two, which is the gut. And we're going to talk about how they connect. And there's, in fact, a number three. Because speak from your heart, listen with your heart. Again, the same thing we see for the gut, we also see for the heart.
With this fucking phone.
And so you need to connect all three of these basically brains at the end of the day. But today we're going to concentrate on brain and gut and not do the heart, which is quite interesting when you combine all three of those. So how do these brains that we have connect to each other? What are the systems between those? Well, we have a nervous system, and there's some connection I'm going to show you. Then we have endocrine, which means your hormones. And I'm going to show you that some of the hormones are created in the gut and then go to the brain. We also have the immune system, which is so important, right? I mean, it has never been more important than now. I mean, you can say that for every pandemic. I mean, when you think about it, entire population and civilizations have been eradicated in the past by pandemics. You call them more like epidemics at the time because there was not that much travel, and it was really never the whole world like we have seen in the last 100 years. But then very important is humoral, everything that goes with the blood. And we're still doing some research. We still find new things in the blood. And then, of course, something that modern medicine does not really talk about, but you and I, we love that, right? It's energy, frequencies. When you think about it, everything has frequency. And I'm not sure I'm going to be able to touch just a little bit on it because, for 1 hour, for me, a frequency talk goes like 3-4 hours. And then the endocrine talk will go an hour and the nerve talk and so on. So today, we're really going to concentrate. So let's look at this nervous system. And we always think the brain will give the commands to the organ system, such as the gut, the heart, the lungs, the kidneys, the liver. But when you really look at it, what nerve system or what nerve, singular, does transmit all these commands, you're going to find one nerve that is really, really important. It's the vagal nerve, or we call it in Latin, the vagus nerve. Now, this nerve is part of what we call the autonomous nervous system. So what is an autonomous nervous system versus a regular nervous system? Well, the regular nervous system is you basically deciding you want to move your hand and you're going to move it, right? So you can do that. Your command comes from the brain, you think about it, you do it. However, the autonomous nervous system is a system that you have trouble commanding. Let's assume you want to poop and you're not going to push, pressure in your belly. So you're just going to sit in the toilet. You're going to tell your brain, I want to poop. Nothing happens because the bowel has its own nervous system and its own command. On the flip side, you might just get diarrhea when you least expect it, right? You have really no control. And so you cannot tell your heart to beat like double the speed. You can do things like running around to bring it up, the heart rate, but it's an autonomous nervous system. So it will decide by itself what it needs. And so this vagal nerve is part of this system. And in fact, it's the main nerve. And we were thinking we are giving commands to all our organ system, but it's the other way around. 85% of the commands come from the organ system and go to the brain when you follow the traffic in this nerve. And only 15% of the traffic or the signals go from the brain back to the organ system. So it's really, really important. These organ systems have a thinking of their own. They have their own dynamics. And so the vagal nerve happens to be the longest nerve in your body. It starts in your brain and ends up in the lower abdomen where you have gut and bowel and kidney and most of you are women, so you have a whole bunch of female organs down there that we don't have as men. And as I said, most of these organs will send out commands. And so the really big question becomes now, what in this organ, who is giving these commands in these organs that the brain can react? And here we know today, it's called the microbiome. A lot of these commands are sent out by the microbiome. And you see here little funky little microbes on this little cartoon. But let's talk about what the microbiome is. The microbiome is the collective genome, meaning all the genetic information of all the microbes. These are bacteria, fungi, viruses, and some other forms of kind of strange microbes. And all of those that are living in you and on you. In fact, we humans could not live with these. If we wouldn't have these microbes, we would die. And this is one of the biggest mistakes of medicine. We have done quite a few in regular medicine, but this is a bad one. We have been treating everybody in the last 60, 70 years with antibiotics ever since we found antibiotics. And that's just about as wrong as it comes because we are killing microbes that we need for survival. And so we have to rethink all that. Now, of course, antibiotics have saved lives if you have bad infections and you use them targeted. But for decades, they have been used to kill viruses and they don't work on viruses. So we have just generated basically resistance to a whole bunch of antibiotics if we would need them by just trying to treat something that doesn't react to antibiotics. Now, you have over 100 trillion of these microorganisms in and on your body. In fact, when I look at you as a human, or when you look into the mirror, you see a human. this human you're looking at, that's you are 10% human cells and 90% microbial cells. So you're 90% not human. You're only 10% human. And when it comes to your genetic information, your genome, we call this the genome, where we connect all your genetic information you got from your mother and your father. Well, guess what? I have to really disappoint you. 0.5% is from your mom, 0.5% from your dad, and 99% of all the genetic information in your body is from microbes. So you're not really human. I mean, you're basically a collection of microbes. And most of your microbiome is in your gut. I mean, you have them everywhere, but most of it is in the gut. And here you see human microbiomes, they're in the gut mostly, but then the skin is probably the second largest. It's called the strata biome. Then you have them in your hair and your scalp. You women have it in the vagina. We now find some in the lungs or in the lung water. We find some in the brain. They're looking now into the blood. They're looking into the lymph fluids. So they're looking everywhere to find these microbes. And why do we have them everywhere? Obviously, they have a meaning in our body, a meaning that we haven't looked at for the last 100 years until about 15, 20 years ago. And so what makes really a difference when I see you and the next person next to you? Well, genetically, when we look at the human genome, you're about 99.9% identical. And then you look at the chimpanzee and the gorilla, then you're 99.8% identical. So you really don't distinguish yourself from apes or from the person sitting next to you. However, when I look into your gut, every single one of you is 85 to 90% different because we have all these different microbes, the microbiome in the gut. And so why do we have that? Why do we have all these microbes? Because they help us to digest food. They support your immune system. So important these days, right? They help you to detoxify toxic compounds. They produce vitamins. They metabolize drugs that the doctor prescribes to you. I hope you better go and live healthy and don't need the drugs. Your gut will be much healthier. They influence your brain. And that's, of course, is the topic of today. How are these things connected? How is the gut with the microbiome connected to the brain? And they do much more. So we don't just have the time to go into all of that. Now, just to give you the first hint at the connection between the microbiome, basically your poop, right? Because your poop in the colon, that's where all the bacteria are sitting in the poop, and you're pooping that stuff out every single day and you flush it down the toilet. I don't want to even calculate how much smart information you're flushing down the toilet every day. But when you look at the poop of babies, right? So here they made the studies. They took 100 babies and analyzed them on their first and second birthday. So again, they just took poop on birthday 1 and poop on birthday 2. And they, at the same time, they analyzed brain development. They looked at certain tests that they could do with babies, and they also looked at the brain size. And they did not find any significant differences in the sizes of the brains. However, they found very clear, significant babies with more healthy bugs, microbiomes, or microbes in the microbiome, in the gut, in the feces, had a significantly better brain function. What I'm telling you is basically those kids were more intelligent and grew up to be more intelligent at school and more intelligent as adults. So obviously there is a connection between your poop and your brain. So let's look at some food, right? So we're looking at food in Africa and food in Europe and the USA. So you see the difference, more or less healthy food. In Africa, lots of nuts and grains, not that healthy, but still, I mean, it's way healthier than the wrong fats and all the sugar we're taking. I mean, we're just consuming an enormous amount of sugar. When you look in Europe and the USA, the average sugar intake per day is around 200, 250 grams. I mean, just go and buy a kilo of sugar and put a fourth of that on the table. You're going to be shocked. That is what you take every single day in form of food, preservatives in the food, beverages. I mean, just add on and on and on. And this is why we're getting so many different diseases. It's the sugar. But when you look at the colors, these colors underneath represent families in your gut, in your microbiome. And you see green color representing healthy families and red color representing unhealthy families. And you see that somewhat healthy nutrition will lead to many more healthy bugs in your gut compared to this like fatty fast food style food that we have with too much sugar, call it carbohydrate, which leads to more rat families, which are unhealthy. And so we're looking at what are all these links in our body. And we realize consuming a so-called Western diet, we call it SAD diet, standard American diet, very sad, right? Indeed. We're consuming these Western diets, and that results in obesity. Of course, too much sugar, will lead to obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, all these kind of things. But we see that when we analyze the poop of people, of obese people, for example, we realize that there's a strong increase in bad microbes. And now, when the next experiments that they did here in this study, they made fecal transplantation. So what did they do? They just took mice and they pooped, and then they took the poop, they put it in a little fluid, and they took it in a catheter and a syringe, and they injected it backwards through that catheter into the colon of other mice. So what I'm telling you, they took poop from obese mice and injected it backwards through the rectum into the colon of very thin mice. And you know what happened? The thin mice became obese without changing the food that they were taking in. So obviously the microbes in your gut have a huge influence on whether you're going to be obese or not. And they did the opposite also. They took poop from thin mice and injected them backwards into obese mice, and the obese mice became thin mice. So they lost weight. So this is a connection that very few of you have heard of and even looked at. And that led to a whole new industry we call fecal transplants. Now, in medicine, we're not really using that yet in a clinic around the corner in every city to make you lose weight. But I mean, this is coming. Right now, we're using this to treat very difficult to treat diseases of your gut, like leaky gut syndromes and other things, and colitis. And they have a success rate of over 90%, whereas medication has a success rate maybe of 30, 40, 50%. So way superior. And so this is an industry that is under development because we start to recognize the huge importance of your poop, basically. So you could go around if you're in a room and you see some nice looking ladies, maybe you can approach them, you can exchange business cards, and then you can say, can we exchange poop? That way you may lose some weight and maybe look a little bit more like them if you like that. So, I mean, this stuff is coming. I'm just kind of joking a little bit about it, but this stuff is coming. Now, the next thing you really need to understand is that the gut is just intimately related to the immune system. And I'm just telling you that it's not really the brain we're talking about today, but I just decided to put this in here because you need to understand that 70% of your immune system is in the gut. Which means if your gut is not okay because you're eating the wrong stuff and you're doing the wrong stuff in life and you're taking maybe the wrong medications and all that, you cannot be healthy because that means your poop is different. You're gaining weight probably, and you're destroying basically your immune system. This in a time of a pandemic where all we do with the government is putting bandages on you. All these mandates we have worldwide are just bandages, right? Okay, let's do a lockdown. That's a bandage. It doesn't address the cause. Let's do a vaccination. It doesn't really, address the cause. It's a bandage. Let's do the mask. Well, it's just a bandage, right? I'm not saying if one of these things, one or the other do work or don't work, because I don't want to have half of you mad at me and half of you loving what I tell you, because that's about the division in the population we have, right? But having said that, we need to go back to what integrative alternative medicine has done for thousands of years. We need to go back to the root cause. And in case of this pandemic, the root cause is either the virus, probably we created that to a certain amount ourselves, unfortunately. Humans were involved in this, it looks like. But then the other part is our immune system. And I mean, about 75% to 80% of the US population is either overweight or obese, which means 70 to 80% does not have an optimal immune system. That would be the root cause. So if you could fix that, that would solve a lot of these problems we're having. And, I just don't see a single advertisement on TV. The CDC doesn't talk about it. The White House doesn't talk about it, that you need to control your body weight, right? Because of the immune system. It all goes back to the gut. And we're just talking about the first part of the connecting dots today, the gut. But now here comes the connection, right? Bugs in your gut might hijack your emotion, and your emotion clearly are in your brain. And it says, tiny molecule in the brain are held by gut bacteria, and it controls anxiety and other things. So let's talk a little bit about the brain. So how does the brain work? Well, it's a mixture of two systems, let's say this way. We have electric cables where signals are going along those cables, but these cables don't really touch each other. So they have a little gap in between. And you see this in this other picture. So there's a cable coming down. The electricity, in this case, goes on the outside of the cable, not like here with this cable on the inside. Electric cable normally are inside, but our nerves are outside. And then they reach this little point where the nerve ends and the next starts, and there's a gap. And we call this the synaptic gap. And what happens here, how does the signal jump from one nerve to the other? Not really jumping. It needs a transmitter. It needs somebody who brings that signal to the other side. And this is why we have so-called neurotransmitters. You heard about those. These are chemical substances. They are in little bubbles here. You see those little yellow bubbles. And whenever the electric signal comes, it releases these yellow bubbles. They go across, and then they found little receptors, like a key finds a keyhole, and then they do their trick. And this is how it works in your brain and in your nerves. It just happens like trillions of times every second, and you're releasing, I don't know how many quadrillion of these little compounds every single second. I mean, it's just very, very complicated. But I can already tell you that some of these neurotransmitters that are helping you brain function, they are formed and created in the gut, and then go with the blood to the brain. And so if your gut is not functioning properly, your brain cannot function properly. That's a very direct relationship between gut and brain. Now, let me show you a little bit more about the brain. So you have, when you do an MRI here, or any imaging technique, you see you have gray matter, like mostly on the outside, and then you have a lot of white matter, right? And when you cut the brain like frontally, we see big, big structures of white matter. Well, I can tell you basically, and here we colored different white matter tracks with slightly different colors. So white matter is the freeway. That's where your signals go really, really fast. There's no much thinking involved. Whereas gray matter, that's your computer, right? That's where a lot of thinking happens in the gray matter. Now, you lady listening to me, you're going to be very, very happy to hear that you have more gray matter than men. So you tend to think a little bit more just by that fact. Whereas men have a lot of white matter, so they're really, really good in sending these signals really fast and then do something without thinking about it. Does that sound familiar? Maybe. So we can look at other imaging technology. And so this is a tensor tractogram. What it is, it's basically only picking these white freeways and little feeders and little roads and neighborhood roads, and different colors represent maybe different freeways and so on. Then you can take that and you can say, okay, I see a car, it's moving from here to here. And we do this middle one. We do a brain-wide association. So we say, okay, I'm close to Houston. So here, down here is Houston, up here is Sugar Land where I live. So I see there's a car traveling on that freeway. And so then I see the car then takes a turn, goes by something at Walmart, and then drives to Dallas and then up to Utah. And so I can follow that car and make a brain-wide association to see what is this brain really doing and how is it using the freeways. And then I can do something else. I can measure oxygen consumption, and I can combine that together with where the car went, and I can figure out what kind of commands were given to what structure that it creates some functional activity. And so today we can really understand a lot, not just about structure. The last 100 years was all about structure, the 200 years. Now it's all about functions. It's about activity, about networks, and how we can influence those. And that's what we need to understand. So this is kind of the old way that we understood, and it's still true today. You have a left brain, and you see all these mathematicians and tax workers. They do all mathematics and calculate and logical thinking. Then you have a free bridges that go over to the right brain, and you see all the poets, the painters, the musicians, the philosophers. So the right brain is your creative brain, and the left brain is your logical brain. And so it begs really the question, are men and women different? Do we have differences in the brain structure and in way women think than men think? And I already indicated that to you. Men sometimes do really, really stupid things without thinking about it. Well, because they have a lot of white matter and the signal goes very fast. Whereas the woman is a little bit more complicated, because she has a little bit more connection between left and right. And so, people making fun of this, they see the man has just one switch to turn on and off the brain, whereas the woman has multiple switches and dials and lights, and everything needs to be fine-tuned, otherwise nothing works. And as we make fun of this, it translates into real life. And so here we combine this again, and we do what I just explained to you in the previous pictures, where we follow the car, we look at where oxygen is being used, and then suddenly we see a difference between the male brain and the female brain. And you see the male brain, which I told you has more freeways, you see all these freeways go directly from recognizing something here up front, going backwards to a little bit the back or the upper part of the brain where action is taken. And that will explain why a man sees a problem and he immediately solves it. He doesn't want to talk to you about that. He wants to solve it. Whereas you see the problem, very logically, you bang it over to your creative brain, you make this problem bigger, then it comes back to reality, and then it goes back and back and forth and back and forth. That's why I call the ping pong game. And the problem that was very small in the beginning now becomes a huge problem, right? And so your husband, the poor guy, comes home after you did this ping pong game for about 6-7 hours, after you got angry about a little something, and he opens the door and you immediately, like a tsunami, right? You want him to sit down and to listen to you for 2 hours. And if he does that, the problem is solved. Whereas he comes in and he says, oh my God, my wife is all excited. I need to solve the problem. And he said, don't worry, I will fix it for you. And that's not what you want. You just want to be listened to. And this is why these brains are different, and this is why men and women are a little different from each other. And I have a whole lecture if you want to listen about that, and hear even a little bit more jokes about men and women. I mean, I'm attacking both men and women, so I'm not just taking side of one gender. But interesting research has been made. So when you send your husband shopping, he will go in the entrance, he will go to the 1 or 2 aisles where he has stuff on the shopping list, and he will immediately leave the store. Then he comes home and he probably forgot half the stuff. Whereas when they measured women and they put them like little trackers on, they were seeing that women in general would just go all over the place and then come home with like double the stuff that they needed, right? So it's interesting patterns. And when you look at stores and you look at how they use, for example, smell, I mean, unfortunately, these are synthetic essential oils that they use. And you look at the pattern, the way they set up the aisles, it's completely different in the female section typically than the male section. And that addresses kind of this. So we can make fun of it and joke. And of course, it's not black and white. There are guys that shop like this and women shop like men, and anything in between, right? But it's just to show a little bit the difference. But again, so now you learned a little bit about the gut. You learned a little bit about the brain. So the big question now is, what is the connection? Why are these two connected? What's going on here? And so we need to look at research. And we look, for example, at obese people. We know that obese people have problem in the gut. And that problem in the gut becomes a systemic inflammation. This is why we say in medicine, overweight and obese people have a 24/7 inflammation, day in, day out, all year long. But these inflammatory markers, these compounds, these are chemical compounds. They go into the bloodstream from the gut and from other organ system or joints go into the bloodstream, and they accumulate in fatty tissue. And guess what? The brain is completely fat. And so this leads to brain problems. That's a huge connection besides the connection with the neurotransmitters I already showed you. So whenever you have inflammation in the gut, you automatically have inflammation in the brain. There's just an absolutely direct connection between the two. Now, when we look at the brain, where in the brain do we have these issues? Well, we see a brain here from the side, like the middle, you see the frontal part, and then the upper part. Here's the visual part for the eyes to process visual information. Here you have your small brain for your balance, and you have your brainstem with all kind of important function. And then in the middle here, you have something we call the limbic system. That's very important to us at Young Living, because this is where we have a lot of receptors for essential oils. Now, when we cut this like from the other side, we see the two halves here. We see a healthy half and a half that has shrunk. This is brain shrinkage. This is dementia and Alzheimer. And you see both the white brain matter and the gray brain matter are shrinking. But we see some parts that are shrinking extremely. And we see this in this part here, red. You see how nice that looks like. And when it shrinks, it's almost gone. Well, that's the part of your memory. This is why people with dementia have memory problems and forget your name. And when you have Alzheimer's, it's extreme. When you look at where is this part, well, it's right down here. It's in the hippocampus. It's in the lower part of the limbic system. So we know from a lot of research that chronic brain inflammation leads to a decline in receptors in this area, so less activity, but also the size, so it shrinks, which means you're going to have less processing in the brain, less memory, and at the same place, you also have the seat of your emotions, which also tells you that your emotions not going to be stable. So let's look at this limbic system and hippocampus. And I see people are asking questions, but I cannot watch the questions while I do the talk. So maybe Jill or someone will put them together and then summarize them and ask me at the end if there are questions. So you see the hippocampus. So it starts here, by the way, where the nose fibers end up, the olfactory fibers. So they're very close connected to this limbic system. But this last part here of the limbic system, we call a hippocampus. Why? Hippocampus in Old Greek means the seahorse. And you see it has the shape of the head of the seahorse. And that's why we call this hippocampus. Or if we just isolate it in this beautiful blue picture, we just see where it is. Now, that's all bad news, right? I just told you that you're basically destroying your hippocampus when you live unhealthy, when you're obese, overweight, and 70–80% of you are, unfortunately. And so that's basically brain destruction connected to the gut. But now, a few years ago, we just got fantastic news. And the fantastic news is written in this somewhat complicated sentence. Adult hippocampal, now you know, so adults, that's us, right? Hippocampus, now you know, it's the structure in orange here. Neurogenesis. You know what genesis is. So neurogenesis is the creation of new brain tissue. So the creation of new brain tissue in this hippocampus, where you saw the shrinkage and memory loss and unstable emotion, all that, the neurogenesis, the recreation of new tissue, so better memory, more stable emotion, and many more things, is regulated by the microbiome. So here again, you see this entire connection directly from your gut, from your poop to the brain. You're basically thinking with poop, right? I mean, so the poop is so important. Your microbes are so important. And again, they're regulated. I mean, how do you change your microbes to the better? You want some action items? Well, healthy lifestyle. Right? I mean, this is how you biohack your body. You need to have exercise. You need to have healthy food. You need to have healthy sleep, because all these things have an influence on this microbiome. And this microbiome has an influence on your memory, on your processing, on your emotions through this connection. So really, when we look at the brain can direct the gut by figuring out what to eat. So this is mainly a brain function, but unfortunately, a lot of hormones are involved. And this is why I use a lot of essential oils to prevent emotionally eating, stress eating, and other things. Then the brain can figure out, slow down or speed up the bowel movements through this vagal nerve that I showed you. It's in charge of nutrient delivery because it decides what you're going to buy in the store. And it maintains somewhat the microbial balance, because depending on what you eat and how you move and what you think, you can have gut health or not. Whereas the gut itself now changes neurotransmitters. stress, anxiety, mood, behavior, memory, processing in the brain. And so this is like a circle. And the gut and the brain are absolutely connected like a phone line. They're connected to each other. So I hope you start seeing the dots. So let's go a little bit more into the brain. And I know you love this because this is a little brain research I did myself with essential oils. And here I have a Royal Crown Diamond, Connie McDaniel. She visited me and I took a very simple tool, put it around her head, measured some brain waves, and then I gave her oils to smell. So first I gave her a lavender, and as expected, she kind of slowed down a little bit and was a little bit, calm. And then I gave her a peppermint to smell. And I looked at different brain waves. So I don't have time today to explain to you different brain waves and all that. We can do this another time. But what I want to point out is this yellow here. We increase within about 5 seconds her concentration, which is a calculation between these different brain waves, by almost 30%. Within about 5 seconds, 10 seconds, by just smelling 1 or 2 breaths full of peppermint. And it's just fantastic. When you see these things, you know how you can start using these oils to support your healthy brain. And so I took this to the next level. I did this very professionally with the full EEG, electroencephalogram, basically measuring all my brain waves. And this is an absolute normal EEG. It must be because it's mine, right? But I looked at that. And then I took a bunch of Young Living essential oils and I sniffed them, right? I did aromatherapy, basically. And I looked at my brain real time. I looked at different parts of my brain. I turned it around, upside down, looked at different brain waves and looked at what would different oils cause in my brain. And here is an example. You're looking at basically at me. So this would be my left frontal part. So this is my left side. And I already told you earlier, left is what? It's more logical thinking, mathematical skills, all that. What oil do you think, and you could put that now maybe in your chat window real quick, what oil do you think increases your logical thinking and your attention span? That's maybe an oil you want to use as aromatherapy when your kids are working on the homework for school, or when your husband has to do the taxes, or you, or whatever, when you calculate your team, and today is the last day of the month, and you need to calculate how much OGV and PV and all these things. So this was peppermint. Okay, so let's look at the next one. So we see the temporal lobes. These are the lobes on the side of your head, they're above the ear or below the ears. And you see I go from no active at all within seconds. I mean, all these changes are within about 5 seconds, 3 to 5 seconds. I go to complete activated language skills, listening skills. Well, ladies, I mean, if you want that your husband listens a little bit better to you, what oil would you put in the diffuser? And in fact, I'm using this oil now for speech therapy with brain patients after accidents or strokes and things like that. So we're doing some testing here with some of these patients. But what oil would activate your temporal lobe? And the answer is it's lemon. So put lemon in the diffuser if you want to increase attention of people listening to you. Then here you see this limbic system. You saw that before, and it's pretty active. You know, I have stuff going on in the front, red here, and all across the hippocampus and all that. So all this down here is the hippocampus. And now I'm smelling, in this case, 3 different oils that put my limbic system completely asleep. So these are calming oils. So which one would you think? Well, of course, lavender, right? But interestingly, I mean, one oil is a blend that already has a really good name, and that's Stress Away. I haven't done it with peace and calming, but I would suppose peace and calming would be very similar. But one maybe that you didn't expect, and that's frankincense. So frankincense really slowed down my inner system, and so when you have rest on this place, then you have more energy afterwards and you can do better work. And the last example I want to show you is like, I just calmed down, I closed my eye, nothing was really active, and then I smelled 1 or 2 oils and immediately everything started activating, right? Up front, temporal, and when I turn it around back there, and even the limbic system. So what oils are completely activating for your brain? I mean, what should you smell if you want to be active for your family? Well, I'll tell you, one was thieves. Yeah, thieves. Why? Because it has lemon in it, right? So now it explains why you listen better. It has eucalyptus in it, which is similar to peppermint, but it has cloves, cinnamon, lemon, and rosemary. And all these spices are very activating for the brain. We know that's from other research. So quite interesting. And the other mixture that did that was digize. Again, it's a mixture full of spices. So spices in general are extremely healthy, not just for your gut, but also for your brain. And here you have another connection. Spice is good for gut and brain and improving gut function and brain function. So the next thing we really need to talk about are the microbes we can eat. Probiotics are good microbes that we're eating. These are bacteria. They are the good bacteria. They're supporting your wellness. But they do many things similar to the microbiome. They produce energy in the muscles. Yeah, it comes from your gut. If you have low energy and you cannot really work out very well, something is not okay with your gut. That's why all athletes need to have good food and good gut when they go to the Olympics or anything like that. Otherwise, it doesn't work out. Then they produce vitamin like B7, vitamin K, folate, B9. They absorb like minerals, calcium, magnesium, and iron. They help to repair the gut wall, very important so that the inflammation may not go to the brain. They help with the healthy immune system because 70% of the immune system is in the gut. So I'm going to tell you, probiotics is probably one of those things you should do every single day in this current, environmental situation, let's say it this way. And of course, we know it supports a healthy brain function. So probiotics are really important. Where do you get them from? Well, probiotic yogurts like Bulgarian yogurt, Greek yogurt, kefir, sauerkraut, miso soups from Japan, kimchi, kombucha, that's something to drink, apple cider vinegar, make your salad dressing with that, tempeh, natto, other things from Japan, dark chocolate, but some other stuff also. So these are the stuff you need to eat on a regular basis, but just make sure they're not full of sugars because that would defeat the purpose. But at Young Living, we have really good products. So when you look at the food and the energy you're getting from the food, if you eat what I call bioacidic, which is really that stuff, right? That's the stuff that's full of poison, that you basically get fresh from the field that was sprayed with glyphosate and herbicide, pesticides and fertilizer. So that's bad. And then you can take stuff that is processed, that's biostatic. It's not as bad, if less poison, but it's certainly not good. Then you can go all to the healthy stuff, right? In the organic food, vegetable and fruit lane. That's really bioactive, but biogenic, generating more function in your body. That's where we talk about probiotics. And we have a clear winner here with one of the products. So if you want to take an action item, this product you see here called Life 9 clearly needs to go on your monthly order, subscribe to save, because if you don't do that, you're just basically hurting yourself. So I think we have a very clear star here amongst the supplements. I mean, I love many of the supplements. And when you start understanding what's in those supplements and how important they are for you, you don't think twice about buying those. And so Life 9, very clear, 17 billion little bacteria, and they double every few hours, right? So if even most of those die in the stomach with the stomach acid, just a few make it through, they're going to duplicate that within a few days. You have more than that. You have 20, 30, 40 billion, that come out, and they're going to balance your families in your gut. And these are all the names that you heard before, Lactobacillus, Bifidobacterium, and so on. Extremely important for you and your immune system. So the next question that I always get is, well, we have essential oils, and let's think about Thieves essential oil, right? What do we use it for? Well, we have a household cleaner, we have laundry detergent, we have soaps. And what do we use those for? Well, in the good old times, in the bad old times, we use them to kill bacteria. So everybody thinks if I take essential oils internally, and we can do that with the Vitality line, then you think you're going to kill all the probiotics and all these good bacteria down in your gut. Well, there are 7 research studies that I could find that talk about that. And the result is always kind of the same. It either has no effect, which is just a couple studies, or it has only a bad effect for bad families, bad. So it only kills the criminals or puts the criminals into jail, whereas it completely supports the good guys. So my conclusion out of these studies, it really doesn't matter when in a day you take your Life 9. And it doesn't really matter if you follow up 2 minutes later with an essential oil capsule or something like that. The research doesn't support that it would kill that. And I know a lot of people take Life 9 at night and they don't do an essential oil a half an hour before or after, just thinking it would maybe destroy that. That's not supported by research. So research, you can do whatever you want, and it will basically support your healthy gut and maybe not so much support your bad gut. It's exactly what you want. So when we bring this all together, right, I showed you a few dots, but I need to go back to all my travels. I mean, most of you know I lived about for 3 years together with Gary in his last 3 years, and he asked me to be with him. And so you see Gary here from the back, and this young gentleman here in the middle has grown up to be a wonderful young man, and that's Jacob. This was the guy from down there. This was in Mexico. And Gary was just about to buy this whole valley here. And there were some reasons why he could not do that at the end. It had to do with drug cartels. But when Gary purchased land for Young Living, and all the farms we have is basically what Gary purchased, he never purchased by just flying over with the plane or by driving by with the car. He would always go out and he would walk it. And he told me, I need to feel the soil. I need to feel whether it's wet, whether my boots sink into the soil or whether it's dry. I need to feel where it goes up and down, because that will determine where I'm going to put certain plants and where I cannot put any plants. And he said, you know, these hills were perfect for ninja red berries. So he wanted to start growing ninja berries in Mexico. And then here, this was pretty moist. So he wanted to do valerian here and other things. And then we went down here into this little creek, and he wanted to do other stuff there, and then take a bulldozer and make a big pond for the distillery that would be on the other side here. And so it was really impressive to do that with him. But every time I went with him around the world, he would start making me eat the dirt. And I'm telling you all these stories now, but then I'm going to connect it back, because it's another dot that you need to understand. And so in this Mexican, we were there for about a week on and off. We were looking at different places in this valley, more dry places, more wet places. And every time he said, Ollie, go down, bend down, take some dirt and eat it, and tell me what you taste and what you feel. And so after a while, you were really able to tell if a soil was depleted, if a soil had some chemicals in it, it gave it a really bitter metallic taste, or if it was rich in nitrogen and all that, it almost felt like you eating like full dirt with some worms in it, real good stuff. So it was interesting. So why do I tell you this story? Because Gary always said you need to know your soil to know your oil. And this is a picture that Mary took in the book about Gary, the pioneer, modern day pioneer of distillation and essential oils. And when you look at, he was treating and not treating, and what was he using at the time? He wasn't using fertilizers and pesticides and herbicides. No, he was treating with frequency. So we're back to this frequency thing. And he was treating with something called biogenesis. And this was a soil full of microbes. So now you start seeing the connections, right? And when you see here, this was without the microbes in the soil, additional, and this was with. So in other words, this was with probiotics and with good microbes supporting the microbiome of the soil. And yes, there is something like that. The microbiome of the soil will determine how healthy your plant is, how deep the roots are, and how good your oil will be and your nutrition will be. So unfortunately, most of the agriculture in these days are like this. They're treated with the wrong stuff. They're not treated with the good stuff. And so we are basically diminishing every brain function, every gut function, every immune function in our body, just with the fact, the way we do agriculture. And what we need to understand is that the soil, the microbes, the microbiome of the soil is very important for the stuff you eat. That's going to determine the microbiome of your gut and your skin. That's going to determine your brain function. It's going to determine your sleep. It's going to determine your emotion, your memory, your brain processing, your immune system, and many more things. It all starts here. And so I want you to really think about that, because that's how I want to kind of almost close today. I have 10 more minutes here. I want you to improve your own soil. And I'm not talking about your backyard, that for sure. But I want you to improve your soil. What is your soil? It's your gut, it's your cells. All your cells, you can look at it as the body, as an agricultural field. And when you improve your soil, your cells, your gut, your poop, when you improve that, seed to seal is not just for the oils, it's also for you, for your own body. Right? Don't put trash in a temple. Your body is like a temple. So this is why you need to have seed to seal for yourself, not just for the essential oils and the CBD and all these supplements that we have. Seed to seal is very important for your own body. And just because we're in a pandemic, optimal body weight has really never been so important in history of mankind until now. And yes, we had bigger pandemics with more dead people, but we never had pandemics that go around so fast around the world. And I'm just going to I'm going to use those last 5 minutes just to give you a few things to think about. When we go into the history of pandemics and the difference between a pandemic, an endemic, and an epidemic. So when something starts spreading in a little village or in a city, it's an epidemic. When it goes all around the world, or most around the world, it becomes a pandemic. And when it's here to stay, like the flu, HIV, things like that, it becomes an endemic. So when we go back in history, we see pandemics as, more epidemics at the time because they wouldn't travel that much, but there were pandemics of the time, 2,000-3,000 years ago. They took out the Byzantine Empire with smallpox. They took out Japan with the virus that came over from Korea. China has been for thousands of years the origin of many of these viruses and all that because they have a very rich animal world. And I don't know, it's just like history has shown it. And of course, in the Middle Ages, we had the Black Death. That was a bacterium that was transmitted with fleas that came with rats from the big ships, the trader ships and all that. And millions, and 300-400 million people died. It eradicated basically Europe. And then you come into the 1900, right, or early 1900, which is 1910, and you start seeing, or 1915, you start seeing the Spanish flu, which had nothing to do with Spanish or Spain, but it killed quite a lot of people here in the US. And then you go forward, and the next pandemics arrive like 1940, 1950, maybe 70. So you start seeing what happened hundreds of years apart, or maybe thousands of years apart, suddenly is happening every few decades. And when you think about the last 22 years, in 2022, we had about 7 pandemics in the last 20 years alone. We had swine flu, SARS, MERS, avian flu, multiple of those, and now we have COVID-19. And so you see it's speeding up. So what I'm telling you, the next pandemic is coming. This one may go over. We might handle this one, hopefully, with bandages. I hope you would take it seriously with your body weight, because that would be, changing things at the core of things. But the next one is coming. And so you need to look at this body weight. And body weight is not just diet, right? Every diet will fail. If you just look at food, you will fail. You will fail within a few months, or within a year, or within 5 years. No, it has to include your brain, your microbiome, your emotions. So we need to get rid of emotional eating. It needs to include sleep, because if you sleep less than 6 hours, you're gaining weight. So you see, it needs to include exercise, of course. So a lot of stuff, not just what you eat and how you move. So exercise and nutrition are 2 important elements, but there's at least 5-6 other ones. And you see here, there's a little logo, and this is now a little teaser, because again, my opinion is optimal body weight has never been so important in the history of human mankind as now, because the next pandemic is coming in the next 3 or 4 years. This is why I created a program, and this is a teaser because it's not here yet for you in English. I just launched that 4 weeks ago in Europe, and I have over 1,000 people with like 10, 20, 30 people a day joining, and we're using Young Living products to do all what I just told you, all these different facets. So what I'm really trying to tell you, we are biohacking. We are influencing your genes. Your genes, with those you're born with, the 1% on your body is your genes, right? The 99% is genes from the microbes. But the one you're born with, they have all little light switches, and you can turn those on and off with sleep, with good nutrition, with good exercise, with good emotions, all these things. And you can take advantage of a healthy lifestyle. And I'll explain you to when I'm a little more ready with all the materials that I need to prepare. I'm going to explain to you a little bit more what that means, EAT 5E, and you see those 5 different colors and circles here. I'll explain that to you later. But I just wanted to tell you there's something, I'm not just explaining what's wrong, I'm trying to give you solutions at the same time. And so today, the big one thing that is very important also for immune system and your life in general and for your body weight and all that is the connection between gut and brain. And I hope you just connected these dots. And with that, I all wish you a gutsy brain, because the key for your brain is in your gut. So go with the Gutsy Brain, and I hope you understood everything I said. It's not well researched. I looked at that not too long ago, and I didn't really find good. We find a whole bunch of differences between athletes and non-athletes, and people who sleep well and don't sleep well. And by the way, COVID is also in the gut. And how do we find COVID early before the outbreak happens? We look at the wastewater, right, in a city, and we see how much COVID is in there. So COVID also changes the microbiome. I'm just telling you, there's a lot of research, but there's almost no research yet about gender and microbiome. It's very interesting to me. Yeah, I mean, the best way to reset is what you see back there is Eat 5E, right? I created this over about 11, 12 years. I had Gary on this program. I had a bunch of executive on this program. And I just kept on developing. So yes, Young Living has some really good product lines, but what Young Living is missing is the entire lifestyle program that looks at the whole body. Right, Young Living has a good product for the gut and has a good thing to lose a little weight with the sleek line, but the connection, the dots are not there yet. And this is where I hope to come in and connect the dots for Young Living and you. So I take 40, 50 capsules a day, right? I have all my Young Living stuff and then non-Young Living stuff here. And I take Life 9 basically within the same 10, 20 minutes than the Defense and other things that I take. Again, it's a good program, right? I mean, Gary came up with it. Gary was extremely smart when it comes to these things, right? And he didn't just come up overnight. I mean, he had many friends and family members that he created these products for. Like one of the oldest products is Comfort Tone, for example, and ICP, right? So these are like 30 years old, 40 years old, these products, and they're still good today. When I look at all these products, they need to constantly be adjusted to the newer science, but some of these Gary products are still up to the high notch of science today. Yes, it's good, right? Because Gary has done some of these. He published, I mean, you have, I'm sure somewhere at Young Living, you can find these protocols, although with compliance, we have become very careful showing these protocols. But yeah, they're good. I mean, cayenne pepper has a huge, things, lemon juice. I mean, it's part lemon is part of my detox also, and of course you need to do detox when you do, lifestyle change. So yeah, no, I'm supporting this. It's clear. It's good. Up here. Right? If you're not mentally with it, you're not going to make it. So the moment you say, okay, I'm going to do this, right? Your brain is thinking the right way. You're already sending signals to the gut. You're already buying different food. You're already going to start, working out a little differently. You probably, maybe not going to sleep a little bit better. That all in turns improves the microbiome. That in turns improves your brain. And so suddenly you're turning a vicious cycle in a very healthy wellness cycle. And that's exactly what I'm going to do with you as soon as I can launch Eat 5E here in the US. Why didn't I launch it yet? Because it's just so much still to write. I wrote a little guide in German. They're using it over there now very successfully. And I'm going to come either by convention, but more likely by January 1st, 23 with this whole program to you.